One place filled with broken glass shards and peanut husks, the entire room reeked of alcohol, making it almost suffocating. Fan Kang's face was red, a mixture of anger and alcohol fumes emanating from his mouth. It felt like a strong gust of air, rushing towards me. His mouth even had specks of foam, exploding and splattering on my face as he forcefully pressed my head to the ground, his teeth clenched, and he questioned me, "Do you want to drive me to my death? Is dredging up old grudges making you happy?" And then he started to punch and kick. I had no strength to resist, so I just held onto my head, crouched down, and let him hit me. He hit me while cursing, "Damn you." I bit my lower lip, trying not to make a sound. At that moment, my child was asleep in the bedroom. Afterward, he loosened his grip, throwing his head back. He opened the door and left. It was late, the dew was heavy, my clothes were tattered, and my hair was a mess. I struggled to carry my son, holding him tight, as my ribs ached intensely, like a dry piece of wood, standing on the roadside at the entrance of the neighborhood, waiting for a taxi. The car arrived at the hospital's emergency center. The doctor on duty who received me was horrified when he saw my appearance. There were multiple bruises on my arms and thighs. The nurse took care of my child, and the doctor treated my wounds. The X-ray results showed a slight rupture of the chest pleura. The ribs were not broken, which brought a slight relief. The doctor asked, "Is this domestic violence? Do you want me to report it to the authorities?" I replied coldly, "Thank you, no need." After treating my wounds, receiving some medication, I went back home. Fan Kang didn't return that night. The next day, he became my ex-husband. We went from the civil affairs office to coming out of it, discussing property and child custody issues. Other than that, not a word was exchanged between us. Fan Kang and I were college classmates. We decided to get married 6 months after graduating, but my parents disapproved. His family was poor and lived far away, with younger siblings in school. Which parents would like a perfect candidate for poverty alleviation for their child? But there's nothing more stubborn than a child's parents. We got married anyway. My parents scraped together some money to help us, and we contributed some more, and we managed to pay the down payment for our house. So, finally, we had a home of our own. A year later, our son was born, and we were a happy family. We truly understood the happiness of having an acre of land, 2 oxen, a loving wife, and a warm bed. To give our child a better life, Fan Kang volunteered to develop a new market in Guangdong, leaving his family in Fujian. But our child was young, and we couldn't be apart. His career was just starting, and it wasn't practical for us to move. So, I stayed in Fujian with our child while he worked in Guangdong. Fan Kang worked tirelessly like a busy bee, running his business day and night. At the end of the year, he won the top sales award, which came with a bonus of 100,000 renminbi. When we received this money, we laughed secretly under the covers. He said he felt more like a legendary bird, a roc, spreading his wings. Then he raised one arm, took a step forward, and struck the iconic revolutionary pose from the 1980s in Tiananmen Square. I couldn't help but find his adorable manner amusing. He wanted to work even harder, to buy a house in Guangdong, and to bring us over, so our child could receive a Hong Kong-style education. He was determined, and I was looking forward to it. They say that distance makes the heart grow fonder, but the truth is, distance just creates more distance. That scoundrel Fan Kang was cheating on me, and I only found out when that wild woman sent me a text message to taunt me. I was out for a walk with my child that day when my phone suddenly received a message. It read, "I'm Fan Kang's girlfriend. He doesn't love you anymore. If you're smart, you'll leave him." At that moment, I felt as if my world had come crashing down. I was dizzy and felt like giving him a good slap right there. I replied, "Oh, please. If Fan Kang really wanted to be with you, would you need to personally deliver this message?" That woman spilled the beans about their affair, and what disgusted me the most was that she offered Fan Kang 500,000 renminbi to leave me. Fan Kang rushed back from Guangdong and practically begged me to forgive him. But I was adamant about getting a divorce. He was like a toothbrush I'd used for 7 years, and suddenly someone else had started using it as if it were a precious item. Could I really take it back? It was repulsive. I didn't tell anyone about this, as I had chosen my own husband, and I would deal with the consequences myself. I left my child with my parents, telling them I was going away for a few days, but in reality, I went back to the places where we used to date, revisiting them to say goodbye to the past. Walking through the student street where we used to hold hands, eating our favorite dishes like hot pot and fish balls, standing on the Jizizu Bridge where we had our first kiss, tears streamed down my face. Why did this beautiful love have to end like this? At that moment, I felt an immense inner conflict. I couldn't let go of him, but I also couldn't fully accept him. I leaned against the railing of the bridge and let myself slide down, collapsing on the ground. I let the winds from all directions dry my tears. After a while, I turned my phone back on, and I had numerous missed calls and messages, all from Fan Kang. I couldn't help but burst into tears again. I called him, saying, "Fan Kang, I know you're a scoundrel, but I still love you." Both of us cried on the phone, our sobs traveling back and forth between us. In the end, I decided to forgive him. To alleviate my concerns, Fan Kang brought me and our child to Guangdong. Since I chose to forgive, I knew I had to work on letting go of the past. Love isn't about gazing at each other, it's about looking in the same direction. But it was so difficult. I couldn't just press a button like a remote control to delete my memories of the past and start fresh. The day we arrived in Guangdong, we had an argument. When I was removing the bedsheet, I noticed a small stain on the mattress that looked like blood. I raised an eyebrow and asked, "What's this?" Fan Kang quickly pulled the mattress out, preparing to drag it outside to throw it away. I shouted loudly, "I asked you, what's this? Answer me." He scratched his head, looking remorseful and helpless. He finally said, "It's her blood, the first time." He quickly apologized, saying, "I mishandled it. I'm sorry, I'm sorry." He dragged the mattress outside to dispose of it. My heart was instantly wounded once again, and when he said the 3 words the first time, he looked as if he was proud of being the first one to claim that untouched territory. I sneered and said, "You were her first, are you feeling proud of that?" He waved his hands frantically, explaining, No, it's not what you think. I was deceived by her. I coldly retorted, "Deceived? You, a married man, deceived by a virgin? Did she hold a knife to your throat and force you into an affair?" When Fan Kang said he was deceived, he meant that the wild woman didn't follow the original agreement's rules and pushed Fan Kang into getting a divorce. Fan Kang was afraid of getting caught, so he broke up with that woman. They had a falling out, but she only relented when she threatened to bring the matter to me. As I looked at the mattress, every item in the dormitory triggered images of them together. I wondered if they switched locations, sometimes on the bed, sometimes in the bathroom, or even in the living room. My thoughts spiraled out of control, and my anger soared to the heights of Mount Everest. I strode into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and my eyes brimmed with hatred. I wanted to kill him. If Fan Kong had resisted, my actions might have been even more extreme. However, he unexpectedly crouched down, tilting his neck, and pointed to his carotid artery, saying, "Come on, cut me here. If that will make you feel better, go ahead and do it." He chose to yield, and the knife slipped from my hand with a clatter. I sat on the floor, crying bitterly, and my child, startled by my sobs, cried with me. Fan Kong smoked a cigarette, stood by the window for a long time, looking outside. Finally, he packed his bags and took us to a hotel. The next day, I demanded that he rent a new apartment, leaving behind everything in the dormitory. He said some of the things were still good. I retorted, "Are you trying to reminisce about the past?" He didn't argue with me and complied with my request. Once we were finally settled, my heart calmed down a bit. But as soon as night fell, I became anxious, making various assumptions and imagining them having dinner together, and after eating, they would end up in bed, only to come back and deceive me again. I couldn't let my mind go any further, so I picked up my phone and began to send him a flurry of messages, urging him to come home. One time, Fan Kong was busy negotiating a business deal with a client, and I called frantically. He hung up several times, but I persisted until he answered. I taunted him, saying, "What's the matter? Am I disturbing your little rendezvous with that wretched woman?" Fan Kong tried to explain that he was busy with work, but I wouldn't listen and demanded he come back immediately. Even though he was on his way back, I kept asking where he was every few minutes. I didn't consider how my frantic calls might affect his driving. The next day, Fan Kong had to leave again. Before leaving, he tidied up his clothes, and I mocked him, saying, "Who are you dressing up for?" He replied, "I'm going out to meet a client." Is it wrong to dress up? I know I betrayed you first, but I've changed. What do you want from me? Please don't insult my dignity every time. I was getting desperate, with one hand on my hip and the index finger of the other hand pointed at his temple. I said, "Do you even have any dignity left? What right do you have to talk to me about dignity? Have you thought about how you've been trampling your own character and dignity by doing what you did? You're a weak, unfaithful scoundrel, wasting my feelings for you." He was very angry but didn't want to retaliate or get into another argument with me. He just sighed deeply and left. I grabbed his arm and asked, "Where are you going? Are you going to see that wretched woman again?" He pushed my hand away with neither force nor gentleness, silently resisting. I felt insane because of his silence. My eyes followed him as he walked away, and I screamed hysterically, "Fan Kong, you scoundrel, if you have any guts, don't come back. Just die out there." My voice echoed through the entire hallway. Back in the apartment, I started to cry, and my child woke up, frightened by my sobs, crawling out of bed to find me. That night, he came back early, as if nothing had happened. As we were about to sleep, he held me from behind, burying his head in my neck, his breath brushing past my neck and reaching my lips. He murmured, "Darling, I love you. Let's live happily together, and stop the fighting, okay?" I knew my behavior was excessively cruel for someone trying to make amends, but I couldn't control myself. I nodded and started crying again. His hands began to caress me, and it had been a long time since we'd been physically intimate. I thought he was seeking comfort as we had done before, but he suddenly changed one specific action. I was immediately alert, pushing him away, and interrogating him like I was judging a criminal. "You weren't like this before. How come you've changed now? Is it because of that wretched woman? How many times did you sleep with her for you to change your usual habits?" He pleaded, "Darling, you're overthinking it. I hardly had any encounters with that woman." I asked, "So how many times is hardly any?" He realized he misspoke once again. No matter what he said, I could find a way to exaggerate and distort it, continuing to fuel the endless war between us. I grabbed a pair of scissors from the dressing table and ruthlessly stabbed them into his palm. Fan Kong let out a painful ah, pulled out the scissors, and pressed his other hand onto the wound, his body contorting with agony. I saw blood pouring out and finally realized that I had really hurt him. Regret immediately rushed over me. Instinctively, I wanted to see how bad the injury was, but Fan Kong pushed me away and went to the hospital alone. I sat down at the edge of the bed and collapsed on the floor, my hands covering my face, full of remorse. What had I become? That night, I couldn't sleep, and he stayed at the hospital until dawn before returning home, dragging his exhausted body. For several days, Fan Kong didn't go out for business, and we enjoyed a few peaceful days. We didn't speak much. Fan Kong played with our son on the bed, and I could hear our child's laughter, and I saw the genuine smile on Fan Kang's face. It made me feel incredibly at ease. The long-lost scene of happiness, I really wished it could last forever. During lunch, Fan Kong finally spoke. He calmly said, "Shuzhen, how about you take our child back to Fujian first? If we continue like this, I won't be able to work, and I can't be constantly managing your emotions." He continued, "I told you I'd change, and I've completely cut ties with her. I understand that you need time, but right now, I need to work and provide for the family. It's really exhausting. Please try to understand." Hearing this, and seeing his serious attitude, my tears fell like a string of beads that had just snapped. My child, even though he was still young, sensed my sadness and helped me wipe away my tears. It only made my heart ache even more, and I held my child tightly in my arms. After wiping away my tears, I said, "We'll go back together. I don't want to be apart. Who knows if that wretched woman will come looking for you when I'm gone. I can trust you, but I can't trust other women outside." Both of us fell into silence, and the air seemed to stop moving. Finally, I mustered the courage to voice my thoughts. "How about you quit your job and come back to Fujian with me to start a new life?" He was quite surprised and said, "That means all my previous efforts would be in vain. Have you ever considered how hard I've worked? I've built up this market through my sheer dedication. You say give up, but it's not that simple." I said passionately, "What's more important, our family or your job?" After that, I held my child and stormed off to the bedroom for a nap. After intense inner struggles, Fan Kong decided to give up his business in Guangdong and return to Fujian with me. I knew he truly loved me and our family to make such a big sacrifice. I deeply reflected on myself and decided not to torment each other any longer. We had to clean up the mess and start anew. Fan Kong wanted to start a business, a nursery specifically for breeding shrimp larvae. But I was a bit skeptical, and I said, "You used to sell shrimp larvae, but just being around the nursery doesn't mean you fully understand the whole process. Maybe we should take our time." He mentioned that over the past few years, he had interacted with shrimp larva technicians quite often, and it wasn't as complicated as it seemed. Seeing his confidence, I decided not to argue further, and eventually, with some creative financing, we spent 300,000 renminbi to build the facility. This industry was known for high profits, but behind those profits lay high risks. If we didn't break even within 3 months, it was generally considered a failed venture. Fan Kong thought he had planned everything perfectly, but as the saying goes, there's always a slip between the cup and the lip. A problem arose in the newly built cement tanks at the nursery. They didn't hold water for long enough, leading to an excess of calcium carbonate in the water, which reacted with the medication, resulting in extremely low shrimp survival rates. In less than 2 months, the 300,000 renminbi had disappeared into thin air. Fan Kong was unwilling to give up and started borrowing money from various sources. This was my first experience with such a high-risk industry, and I strongly opposed his decision to invest again. Fan Kong, frustrated and drinking white wine, impatiently said, "You don't understand. I've been in this industry for several years, and I know it well. This time, it's just bad luck." I retorted, "Who knows if your luck will turn this time? Regardless, I won't agree to borrow money for investment again." He finished his drink in one gulp, slammed the glass onto the floor, and said, "It's your fault. You suggested I give up the business in Guangdong, and now that I'm facing some setbacks in my new venture, you're trying to discourage me. In the end, it's your responsibility." Seeing his drunken and unbecoming behavior, I couldn't contain my anger and exclaimed, "Fan Kong, have you forgotten that it was my suggestion? Just because it didn't work out, you blame me now? You want to borrow money, right? Didn't that wretched woman offer you 500,000 renminbi? Why don't you ask her if you're worth that price now?" With the failure of his new business and a lack of funds, the old grudges I brought up pushed Fan Kong to the edge. He threw away the half-smoked cigarette, pushed my head to the ground, and we relived the same scene as before. I had once read a passage online that described the aftermath of an affair. In a fairy tale, 2 greedy people dig for treasure underground and find a skeleton. Even if they quickly bury it, and even plant trees and flowers on top, both of them know what lies beneath the ground. They see the trees, they see the flowers, but they think of the skeleton buried beneath. Fan Kong was genuinely trying to turn a new leaf, but I couldn't let go. Whenever the opportunity arose, I unintentionally brought up past wrongdoings to taunt him. I understood the logic, and if this situation had occurred with someone else, I might have been a skilled mediator and counselor, but I couldn't do it for myself. When he hit me, I felt no anger, and I even felt a strange sense of relief. However, that single blow erased all the emotional ties between us. Both of us knew one thing: we could never go back to the way things were. The skeleton would always be there. Marriage can be like a colorful fabric, full of patterns and variations. Love, on the other hand, is like a pristine white cloth, without the slightest stain. What I wanted was that white cloth, pure and unblemished. In life, there are many things that don't develop according to our wishes, but we have the right to choose to end them. I couldn't accept Fan Kong anymore. Instead of mutually tormenting each other, it was better to let go, leaving ourselves a way out. For the rest of our lives, we could each find our own path to happiness.